They didn't see her coming. Not in the way someone fails to notice a person walk through a door, but in the way a system fails to recognize the moment it's already started crumbling. At 2:11 p.m. on a Monday, the marble lobby of Calhoun and Mercer Bank looked like it always had gleaming floors, glass walls, and the dull hum of institutional indifference. The light outside had begun to slope westward, slicing across the waiting chairs and the metal rim of the reception desk. A TV in the corner spoke on mute. People came in wearing their Monday's tired heels, generic ties, loan papers clutched like prayer cards. They waited their turn. They apologized for existing. They smiled at receptionists who barely returned it. The air was sterile, but underneath something had been rotting for years. Then she walked in. The room didn't go quiet. It went aware. Some looked up, not because they wanted to, but because her presence moved the weight of the room, just slightly, like a gust that makes the blinds tremble. They saw the curve of her dress, the slit of lace beneath the blazer, the skin they didn't expect to see in this kind of place. They saw what they wanted to see. And in that split second, they had already decided everything about her not wealthy, not important, not someone whose name sat on a boardroom plaque. What they didn't know, what none of them could have known, was that the woman they dismissed with a glance had come to dismiss them in return. Silently, permanently, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Before we dive into this story, let us know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe, because the next story is one you don't want to miss. At exactly 2:11 p.m., the glass doors of Calhoun and Mercer Bank rotated slowly, letting the late Miami sunlight spill across the marble floor. The stone tiles gleamed so polished they seemed to reflect arrogance itself. The room wasn't noisy, but alive with the sounds of function keystrokes, light footfalls, the steady drone of tellers inviting clients forward. Then she walked in, and everything stopped, not by sound, but by atmosphere. She wore a fitted business dress in graphite gray, tailored so precisely that it kept every curve without revealing any of them. A cream-white blazer rested open on her shoulders, unbuttoned, showing just enough of her chest to hint at the black lace beneath. Delicate, alluring, never vulgar. Her skin shimmered like caramel beneath the light smooth, cool, untouched by powder. Her hair, pulled into a French twist, was neat, save for a few strands that slipped naturally behind her left ear. No red lipstick, no necklace, no Gucci or Chanel, just a single slender ring on her right hand, thin enough to be a warning, if you knew how to read it. Her name was Avery Sinclair, age 34, a name once featured on the cover of Forbes' Women's Power list, but here, now, no one knew that. A man at the corporate services desk looked up from her feet to her neckline. A glance, then a second, then a third, not lecherous, but long enough to say, she doesn't belong here. He wore a navy slim-fit suit, a deep burgundy tie, and a name tag engraved in brushed metal, Ryan G., Client Services Manager. He glanced at the receptionist and smirked. No words needed. The look between them was its own signed indictment. Avery stepped up to the reception desk. Her nude high heels tapped steadily across the marble, neither too loud nor too soft, just enough to make you wonder, is she headed to a boardroom, an interview, or maybe to reclaim something no one expected? She didn't have to speak first. "Good afternoon," the receptionist said, eyes lifting from the screen. "Too late. How can I help you?" "I'd like to speak with the branch manager," Avery said. Her voice was smooth, without echo, without stumble. "Do you have an appointment?" The question came too fast, as if rehearsed in advance for customers like her. No Rolex, no platinum member card, no urgent posture of the wealthy. Avery looked at the receptionist, long enough for her to blink, then turned her head, scanning the room like someone choosing a seat at a restaurant, not a service desk. "I can wait," she replied, briefly. She chose a dark brown leather seat near the window, crossed her legs. Her skirt slid just enough to hug her hips. A hint of black lace peeked from her blazer as she bent to check her phone. Someone looked, someone pretended not to. Someone else noticed both. Avery didn't care. She wasn't sitting to appear wealthy. She was sitting to see how long it would take for people to reveal what they normally hide. Across the room, Ryan, still watching, leaned toward a coworker. "Who is she? Looks like one of those influencers who wandered into the wrong place." The other man chuckled. "Probably here to apply for a car loan." Avery heard it. Not because they were loud, but because she'd heard that kind of talk dozens of times. It no longer made her angry, only reminded her every day. Hundreds of people are treated like this without a chance to fight back. She'd prepared for this moment, not today, since over 20 years ago, when her first account application was denied for insufficient credit history. Time passed slowly, like the ticking clock in a courtroom. A staff member walked by carrying coffee for another client, ignored her. Another flipped through documents with tapping fingers, glancing around as if looking for an excuse to ask her to move, but no one dared, not yet. Avery scrolled her phone, not for updates, just to give her eyes something to do while others tried not to stare. Each time she adjusted her hair or shifted her blazer, their gazes jolted like they had glimpsed a dagger beneath silk. This woman didn't ask permission to exist. She occupied space the way only someone once excluded knows how to, by measuring every tile beneath her shoes. 2:18 p.m. The inner office door opened. A slightly overweight, middle-aged man rushed out, papers in hand. His eyes locked on Avery, and he froze, as if he'd seen a ghost from a life he had tried to forget. "Ms. Sinclair?" His voice cracked, stunned. Chairs scraped, people stood. Ryan shot upright, fixing his tie. The receptionist stammered. Avery stood, slowly, straight-backed. Her lips curled into something that wasn't a smile. It was a signal. "You have 5 minutes," she said, "to explain why I should keep anyone in this branch employed." No one laughed now. No one asked if she had an appointment. They were only just beginning to realize they had underestimated the one woman who could erase an entire branch with a single call. He was the branch manager, Daniel Ruiz, in his early 50s. Hispanic American, white dress shirt slightly wrinkled at the elbows, tie askew. When he saw Avery stand, something in him collapsed, like someone had sucked all the oxygen out of the room. "Ms. Sinclair," he repeated, his voice lower this time, almost pleading. "I sincerely apologize. I wasn't notified you'd be visiting today." Avery walked toward him, slowly, expressionless. No handshake, no pleasantries. She stopped 3 steps from him, like an interrogator gauging a man's pulse before the first question. "It's fine, I only need one thing," she said. Daniel swallowed hard. "What would that be, ma'am?" Avery tilted her head. "I want to see how your system operates, when it thinks I'm not watching." Behind them, Ryan, the client services manager, began moving. Gone was the smug posture from 10 minutes ago. Now, he slinked back to his desk like a man trying to erase a file he should have never saved. Avery didn't look his way, but she knew. Her gaze didn't move much, but her awareness stretched so wide, it made people feel exposed. "So, shall I escort you to the VIP lounge?" Daniel offered, trying to summon both deference and damage control. I can arrange for someone to bring you a private espresso, or..." "No need," Avery cut him off. "We'll sit right here, in the lobby, among the people you've chosen to represent this brand." Daniel hesitated, then nodded. He pulled the chair across from Avery, and for the first time that day, he sat lower than her. No one in the lobby spoke, but the silence was thick as brick. One person adjusted their name badge. Another pulled out their phone to check the schedule, really, to avoid meeting her gaze. A female staff member with light brown skin and curly hair walked past from the business accounts section. Her eyes flicked toward Avery, quick, nervous. Inside that glance, a flicker of empathy, a trace of fear, and a faint, fragile thread of hope. Avery caught it. She didn't react, but her left hand, resting on her thigh, curled a single finger like a message. "I see you. Hold on." "Daniel," she said, her eyes still fixed on him, "do you know why I chose this branch as my first visit?" Daniel shook his head. "I assumed it was because this is our flagship for South Florida." "No," she replied. I came because I received 7 internal reports in the last 90 days regarding discriminatory service practices. 4 from staff, 3 from clients, none were addressed by middle management. Daniel wasn't sure whether to nod or shake his head. "Do you want me to repeat that?" Avery asked, her voice dropping a note dangerous now. Daniel shook his head again. At that moment, the receptionist walked over quietly, placing a glass of water in front of Avery like an offering at an altar. Her hand trembled. The water tilted, spilling a few drops onto the glass tabletop. Avery didn't look at the glass. She looked straight at the receptionist. "You were the one who asked if I had an appointment, weren't you?" The receptionist nodded, barely breathing. "You followed protocol, but your eyes weren't in any manual." The receptionist turned pale. From across the room, Ryan rose from his chair, pretending to head for the restroom, but Daniel called after him, "Firm, Ryan, sit down." Ryan froze, then returned to his seat. This wasn't a dispute between an irate customer and staff anymore. This was a courtroom, and everyone had a file waiting to be read aloud. Avery slowly turned, surveying the lobby. "Do you know," she said to Daniel, "that your branch lost 12 high-net-worth clients in the last 3 months?" Daniel blinked. "I wasn't aware of that figure." "Do you know why?" He shook his head. "It wasn't interest rates. It wasn't policy. It was because they didn't feel like they belonged here." That final line wasn't hers. It was lifted, word for word, from a buried client complaint. She quoted it like scripture with the cadence of a verdict being read. She stood. No drum roll, no applause. But somehow, the room shrunk as she stepped to the center. "How many minutes do we have left?" she asked. Daniel looked confused. "Excuse me." "How many minutes," Avery repeated, "before I decide to send a full report of this visit to my system oversight board with security footage, complaint history, and the diversity breakdown of your personnel chart?" No one responded. They didn't have to. At Calhoun and Mercer, it typically takes 10 minutes to complete a cash transaction, but today, it took exactly 10 minutes for everyone to realize. One wrong look, one biased gesture can end a career. People often think what scares others is power, but truly, the most frightening thing in any room is intentional silence. Avery Sinclair didn't raise her voice. She didn't slam the table. She didn't point fingers. She simply sat back down, crossed her legs, and placed her phone on the table screen face down. A small gesture, but it froze the entire lobby because no one knew if she was recording, filming, or simply counting the seconds. Daniel, the branch manager, dabbed his forehead with a tissue he pulled from his sleeve, his tie now completely crooked, hair tousled, voice dry. Would you like me to call the regional director for support?" Avery didn't even glance at him. "No need," she replied, her voice soft as a turning page. "I don't want to cover up this picture with context. I just want to see how this room reveals itself when no one's protecting it." She turned her gaze toward the far end of the lobby, where Lauren, a woman of color in her 30s, sat trying to melt into her chair. Lauren had handled small business accounts, a quiet, competent worker never reprimanded, never rewarded. Avery tilted her head slightly, eyes fixed on her. "Your name is Lauren, isn't it?" Lauren flinched, nodded. "Have you ever been considered for a team lead role even after 5 years here?" Silence. "Did anyone ever tell you why not?" Lauren opened her mouth. A quiet eye escaped, then vanished. All eyes in the room turned to her, the kind of spotlight she had never wanted, but today could no longer avoid. "Because I didn't fit the image of someone who could represent high net worth clients," Lauren said softly. "That's what they told me during my year-end evaluation." The words dropped like a small hammer on glass. Avery nodded, not surprised, but still, she nodded as if to say, "I needed you to say it, not me." Daniel stood up quickly. I'm not sure who said that to Lauren. I'll have to check." "No need," Avery cut him off. "I know who said it. I just need to know. Were you in the room that day?" Daniel stared at the floor. Yes. Did you object? He shook his head. Then there's nothing left to check, Avery said. To the right, Ryan, the customer service manager who smirked when she first entered, was slowly shrinking from view, but Avery turned toward him. Her eyes stopped at the deep red tie around his neck. You're in charge of onboarding new staff, aren't you? Yes, that's right, Ryan replied, throat dry. Have you ever trained people to recognize high-value clients without relying on the usual cues, leather shoes, brand-name watches, and expensive cologne? Ryan hesitated. I use real-world examples. Ah, Avery interrupted. And in your reality, people who look like me are less likely to be VIPs, aren't they? Ryan stayed silent, his hands clenched. Across the room, Lauren gripped her sleeve. For the first time in 5 years, she felt this room actually listening to her, not out of respect, but out of fear. A young Asian male employee, Min, stood frozen near the printer. He hadn't moved in minutes. He wasn't looking at Avery. He was watching Daniel. Then Ryan. He knew, they knew, and now she knew that they knew. Avery opened her handbag, pulled out a thin black folder, unlabeled. She placed it on the table, didn't open it. I brought 3 internal reports, she said, 2 from high-value clients who withdrew their assets, 1 from a staff member who quit, citing a pattern of systemic favoritism. All 3 from this branch. 3 months, 3 people, 3 chances to respond. Not one of you did. She looked Daniel dead in the eye. And now I'm here. The question is, am I too late or right on time? No one spoke, no one touched their water, no one picked up their phone. Not because they feared she was the CEO, but because they feared she hadn't said she was. When a black woman, in a fitted dress, blazer open just slightly, walks in without declaring a title but still renders an entire system silent, that's when people start remembering everything they ever said and everything they shouldn't have. Silence is the armor of the weak, but in the hands of the powerful, it becomes the most dangerous weapon in the room. 2:34 p.m. In under 25 minutes, she had gone from being asked, "Do you have an appointment?" to holding the entire atmosphere in the palm of her hand. No one laughed now. No one dared to exhale too loudly. But Avery Sinclair still hadn't said who she was. And that silence, that deliberate withholding, was what frightened them most. Daniel, the branch manager, sat like a man being investigated. His fists clenched, one leg shook, his eyes darted toward the staff, looking for some kind of ally. But all he got were glances that slid away fast, guilty and full of fear. People who were once his now looked at him like the first one who would be sacrificed. Avery didn't raise her voice. She didn't announce her rank. She simply let fear do the speaking for her. "Min," she said, turning her attention to the young employee near the printer, "may I ask you something?" Min nodded slowly, still holding the unprinted sheets in his hand. "In the past 6 months, have you ever seen a client turned away simply because they didn't dress like someone who had money?" Min swallowed hard. I've seen some situations that were unprofessional." Avery smiled slightly. It wasn't sarcastic. It wasn't warm. It was the kind of smile that made people want to confess just to be spared. "What do you mean by unprofessional?" she asked. Min glanced at Daniel, then at Ryan. No one stepped in. No one said a word, so he went on. "Well, there was a black woman who came in, wearing a work uniform. She wanted to open a business account, but the supervisor said, not worth the time, because she looked like she was just hustling solo." "Did you report that?" Avery asked. Min shook his head. "I mentioned it to a senior staff member, but they said, let's focus on pre-approved leads for now." Avery nodded. "And yet, here you are still working here." "Yes." "But do you still feel like you belong here?" Min didn't answer. She didn't need him to. Far off in the corner, Lauren, the woman of color who had been denied a promotion, was watching Avery the way someone watches the first ray of light after years in a long hallway. "Lauren," Avery said, not turning her head, I remember you have an MBA, don't you? Lauren blinked. Yes, I do. Who interviewed you last year when you applied for the team leader position? Lauren hesitated. Daniel and Ryan. And what did they say? Lauren bit her lip. They said I had the skills, but didn't inspire confidence in VIP clients. The words dropped like a silent slap on polished tile. Avery tilted her head. Her cream blazer shifted slightly, revealing the edge of black lace underneath, just enough to remind the room that this body, too, once made them avert their gaze. At that moment, a man near the private consultation desk, white, in his 60s, gray suit, stood up. "Excuse me," he said, looking around, "but may I ask, what exactly is going on here?" His voice was like a starter pistol breaking the stillness. Avery turned to him, eye to eye, no flinch. "Sir," she said, "I'm a client, and I'm being treated exactly the way they think someone like me deserves to be treated. You speak like someone who's evaluating this system." Avery didn't reply immediately. She stepped toward him. Her heels tapped slowly. Each step pulled the room tighter around the curve of her fitted skirt. "Standing face to face," she said quietly. "Have you ever thought that you're depositing money into a system that judges clients based on collars and the shine of their shoes?" The man said nothing. He sat back down and didn't ask again. At the reception desk, Megan, the young woman who had spilled water earlier, was crying, quietly. No one noticed, but Avery did. She didn't call her out. She didn't name her. She simply looked, and in that look, Megan understood she wouldn't be forgiven, but she might still get a chance to do better. At 2:42 p.m., Daniel stood, walked over to Avery, and held out an iPad. "Ms. Sinclair, may I ask something?" She nodded. "Are you here to audit us or to make decisions?" Avery pressed her lips together, tilted her head. "I'm here," she said, locking eyes with him, "to see how fast this place collapses, once no one's left to cover for your mistakes." She hadn't said she was the CEO, but people were beginning to fear that was the very next sentence out of her mouth, and by then, no one would have time left to apologize. 2:48 p.m. The Calhoun and Mercer lobby still gleamed, but no one thought the light came from halogen bulbs anymore. The light now came from truth being pulled into the open, like a string unraveling a whole suit. Avery Sinclair still hadn't said her title, but every question she asked made the room feel like it was sitting on a bench waiting to be called. "Ryan," she said. The client services manager, the same man who'd smugly remarked earlier that she was probably here for a credit card, looked up, still in his tailored suit, still wearing that dark red tie, but this time his jaw was tighter, his confidence cracked. "Do you remember a client named Thomas Espinoza?" Avery asked. Ryan blinked. "Yes. Logistics business based in Kendall." "Did he withdraw all his assets 3 weeks ago?" "Yes, but he didn't meet our new portfolio minimums. So, you told him that to his face, didn't you?" Ryan said nothing. "And then," Avery continued, "he filed a formal complaint, which you marked as not requiring follow-up because, quote, no commercial value in retention." Ryan opened his mouth to defend himself, but closed it. There was nothing useful to say. Avery tilted her head. Her pearl earrings swayed gently. "Do you know who he is to me?" Ryan didn't answer. "He was my first financial advisor, the man who loaned me $20,000 when I was building my first company, the only one who believed in me after this very bank rejected my file for listing startup real estate as my profession. You dismissed him because his suit wasn't freshly pressed." A faint gasp echoed across the room, not loud, but synchronized, as if everyone had just seen themselves on a security tape they hoped didn't exist. Avery turned to Daniel. "Were you aware of that complaint?" Daniel nodded weakly. "Why didn't you address it?" "I thought Ryan had a valid operational reason." "And you felt that reason was valid enough when the rationale was, the man isn't worth replying to." Daniel didn't speak. Avery didn't press. She continued, like reading aloud from an internal memo. This branch hasn't just failed in service. It's failed in understanding human value. You don't assess clients by reliability. You measure them by their collar width and shoe shine. And that's not policy, Daniel, that's attitude. In a back corner, Lauren clenched her fists. For the first time in 5 years, someone was naming out loud the things she had once swallowed in silence. Megan, the young receptionist, blinked rapidly. Her tears had dried, but the feeling of being undressed by the truth remained. Avery sat back down, smoothed her skirt, not provocatively, but with the composure of someone who controlled every crease in the room. "Is there anyone here?" she asked, scanning the room. "Who would like to speak before I start opening the data I brought?" No one moved. Lauren glanced sideways at Min. Min stared at his shoes. Avery nodded slightly. "I understand. This system was built on 3 layers: silence, compliance, and denial. Don't worry. I came with the antidote for all 3. She opened her handbag, pulled out a sleek black tablet, steel edges, placed it on the coffee table, tapped it twice. "Daniel," she said without looking up, "I just emailed you 3 files. A client exit report citing racial bias in service. A staff departure statement citing lack of voice. And the full list of 14 occasions this branch was rated under review but were scrubbed from the summary reports by your assistant." Daniel blinked fast. His mouth opened. I'll need to verify." "No need," Avery said calmly. "I brought the originals from my system, your system." At that moment, for the first time, everyone in the room understood she wasn't just a client. She wasn't just an investor. She was someone very, very high in the structure that held all of them up. Sometimes, the most terrifying person isn't the one who shouts. It's the one who speaks your full name and date, and suddenly, every wrong you've ever buried starts breathing again. 2:54 p.m. The atmosphere inside Calhoun and Mercer wasn't just tense anymore. It had become something else entirely, a room waiting to be named. No one looked at the clock, but everyone felt that something irreversible was about to happen. Avery Sinclair still hadn't raised her voice, still hadn't shown credentials, still hadn't asked for anything unreasonable. But now, she stood up. Not in anger, not in haste. Just stood, like someone who had waited long enough for others to speak, and now it was her turn. "All right," she said, voice level like she was reading the opening line of a very important press release. "I suppose it's time I tell you why I'm really here." No one replied. No one exhaled. She walked to the center of the lobby between the teller booths, the waiting area, and the VIP client desks. Each step solid, each heel tap rang like a gavel on a courtroom bench. "My name is Avery Sinclair," she said, 34 years old, CEO and founder of Atlas Equity Partners, and one of the largest shareholders currently overseeing Calhoun and Mercer since last March. 1 second later, the room detonated into silence. Not a gasp, not a scream, just a rupture and internal collapse without sound. Ryan stepped back, mouth ajar like he might apologize, but the words wouldn't come. Daniel turned pale, looked down, as if the floor had prepared a resignation letter and left it open for him to sign. Lauren cried, not from fear, but because someone had just made justice feel real. Avery looked at them, all of them. The people who had dismissed her for her tight skirt, for her unbuttoned blazer, for her skin, for not asking for permission. Then she turned to the customers still seated wide-eyed, as if watching a political theater unfold in real time. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, addressing the room for the first time, "what happened here today isn't personal. It's a test, a reflection, a mirror held up to show how a system behaves when it thinks no one important is watching." She then glanced toward the ceiling camera. No need to hide, no need to pose. "Go ahead and record this," she said, looking directly into the lens. "For the board, for the internal auditors, and for every employee who ever submitted a resignation email that never got read." She turned back to Daniel. "You are the manager of this branch, and your biggest failure isn't that you allowed these things to happen. It's that you thought no one would ever circle back and check under the rug. Daniel bit his lip. I didn't intend. That's the problem, Avery cut in. This system is run by people who never intended harm and also never intended to fix it. She turned toward Ryan. And you saw me walk in, saw my body, and decided I wasn't worth your service. Am I wrong? Ryan breathed hard. No, I just thought... You thought right, she interrupted. You thought I wasn't white enough, not male enough, not branded enough to be in control of anything important. And now that you know who I am, you realize you were wrong. Ryan looked down, didn't speak. No, Avery said. You weren't wrong because I'm the CEO. You were wrong the moment you made that judgment before you knew anything about me. She turned to the rest of the staff. I didn't come here to be angry, she said. I came here to see who would stand for what's right when no one thought I had the power to change anything. Then she looked at Lauren. Lauren, she called gently, I'll need you to join me in next week's Culture and Leadership Review meeting. Lauren nodded, couldn't speak, just stood a little taller like someone finally called by her full name for the right reason. Avery turned to her tablet, tapped the screen. An internal memo appeared. She passed it to Daniel. You will send this email to the entire branch system by 4:00 p.m. today. The contents include acknowledgement of a surprise audit at the Miami branch, names of staff who failed baseline conduct standards, and a commitment from the executive board that this will never happen again. Daniel held the tablet with both hands, nodded, didn't speak. She didn't need a title. She didn't need a microphone. She didn't need to threaten, because when someone crosses the wrong kind of silent power, they remember it forever, even when no one talks about it again. 2:58 p.m. No one in the Calhoun and Mercer branch dared check the time, but everyone felt it, the quiet shift from tension to dread. The kind of dread you feel when names are about to be said out loud. The kind of silence that forms when a system is about to confront the truth. It's always outsourced. And then, Avery Sinclair placed her tablet on the reception coffee table, with both hands, like someone laying down a verdict, not a device. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, voice steady, I'm not sending this in an email. I'll say it here, in person, in front of everyone. She didn't lift her chin, didn't change her tone, but her words lowered the ceiling by 2 feet. What happened today didn't begin today. It's been simmering in every nod of indifference, every biased evaluation, every glance that weighed a client by skin tone or suit label. And like any rotten structure, she said, the first step is to cut out what's already decayed. Megan, the young receptionist, shrunk into her chair. Ryan stood near the wall, visibly tense. Daniel Ruiz, the branch manager, was still standing, but now his spine was no longer straight. Lauren, once denied leadership for not inspiring elite clients, stood behind, watching like someone about to witness something she never imagined was possible. Avery tapped her screen once. Ryan Whitmore, she said. The name was soft, but it hit like a courtroom slam. Ryan straightened up. A faint gulp cut through the stillness. Your senior client services manager, but in the past 2 years, you've prioritized based on unverified metrics, refused to process 5 client requests because they didn't wear suits, and most recently noted that a black woman had hair oil scent in your behavioral assessment column. Several people widened their eyes. Ryan scanned the room. No one made eye contact. You are terminated immediately, system access revoked, cited reasons subjective client profiling, latent racial bias, and breach of ethical service protocol, Section 7, 3.1. Ryan opened his mouth, closed it, then nodded. Nothing he said could take that sentence back. Avery turned. Daniel Ruiz. His name landed differently, more slowly, like it needed time to sink in. You are the branch manager, and the core responsibility of that role is to not sit quietly while wrong happens in front of you. Daniel fidgeted. You ignored 12 formal complaints in 18 months, 3 involved clients of color being downgraded in service priority. You also allowed Ryan to implement a so-called client intuition matrix, which, in truth, was just selecting clients by sight. Daniel started to speak. Avery raised a hand. "I'm not terminating you yet. You'll complete full documentation and system handover by 5:00 p.m. today. Then the executive board will decide." Daniel exhaled, but it wasn't relief. It was a deadline to write his own confession. Avery tapped again. "Megan Price?" The receptionist flinched, eyes glassy. "You're new, but you learned fast to suggest savings accounts instead of premium services to black clients. You didn't say it aloud, but the way your eyes shifted when I asked to speak with management said enough." "I'm not firing you," Avery continued. "I'm sending you to a retraining unit 6 weeks. After that, if you return, I want to see someone who understands policy can be taught, but respect is always a choice." Megan nodded. Tears flowed quietly, but there was no resistance. Avery turned to Lauren Williams. This time, her tone softened like a blanket being pulled across a cold room. Lauren looked up, eyes red, not from shame, from something heavier being recognized. "You were denied leadership for not appealing to VIP clientele, yet you helped over 30 businesses stabilize accounts more than anyone here." Lauren said nothing. "Starting tomorrow," Avery continued, "you'll oversee the SME division at our Brickell branch, salary increased by 35%, with your own office." Lauren gasped, a sound of release, a wound finally allowed to breathe. "You don't need to thank me," Avery said. "Just remember next time you see something wrong. Don't wait for someone in heels to speak for you. You speak." Lauren stood straighter, like someone just given her real name back. Avery looked at the lobby. This was no longer a place of scripted greetings. Clients were still there, so were staff. But now, no one looked at her the same way. They didn't see a black woman in a tailored dress anymore. They saw a woman who turned silence into trial and held every person accountable. She didn't just fire people. She fired a way of seeing. She promoted not by resume, but by who had stayed silent too long and still had the courage to stand. 3:12 p.m. Avery Sinclair hadn't sat down again. She had been standing since the previous chapter, and she wouldn't sit until this system changed its posture. Daniel, the branch manager just stripped of control, stood to one side, staring at his tablet as if trying to print out an excuse, but failing to find the file. Ryan, the client services manager, was already gone. As instructed, not a single good luck left behind. Lauren, now promoted, had not yet left the floor. She remained still, as if the world had just shifted beneath her and she was waiting to see if it would hold. Avery pulled out her phone, typed a message, short, no emojis, no expression. 2 minutes later, 3 people walked in, no knock, no introductions. They wore white button-down shirts, dark slacks, and gold-toned name badges, the mark of the Department of Reform and Service Culture, a unit Avery had personally launched 3 months ago. 1 black, 1 Latino, 1 Asian. Each had eyes not for watching, but for evaluating and responding through action. Avery made a brief introduction. "This is your temporary reform team. They'll run this branch for the next 21 days, not to replace but to recalibrate the nervous system of this place." A female employee from the teller desk raised her hand, slowly. "You mean we're all going to be directly monitored?" Avery nodded. "No, not monitored, accompanied, but no one here will be assumed innocent by default." She gestured to the reform team. The lead, Khalil, mid-40s, tall, calm voice, stepped toward Daniel. "Mr. Daniel," he said, "we will be taking over operational control of this branch. Please come with me to complete the transfer documentation." Daniel followed. He didn't resist, but each step landed like he was walking over a version of himself that had already been discarded. Avery scanned the space, then pointed toward the VIP lounge area, usually reserved for clients with assets exceeding $1 million. "In 1 hour, that space will become the feedback lounge," she said. "Every client who was once rejected, dismissed, or overlooked can return. No appointments, no classifications, just the desire to be heard." A young male teller named Paul raised a question. And what if they insult the staff? Avery met his eyes. We have policy for insults, but the quiet trauma of being subtly excluded that never had a hotline, this is it. She continued. I want every employee here to write a 100-word personal mission statement, each of you, why you still want to stay in this system. In 3 days, I will read every single one, and if a single word smells false, I will know. It wasn't a threat, no microphone needed. That sentence cut straight to the spine of the room. She turned to Lauren. You're still here, Lauren nodded, still not believing what just happened. I believe it. I'm just not used to this feeling, standing in the center instead of the edge. Avery stepped closer, her voice softened. Then keep that feeling, and when you see someone else standing on the edge, pull them into the center. Lauren nodded. No words could match what had just been said. Avery looked toward the lobby, where a few customers were still seated, watching, hesitant to leave as if they might miss a turning point in American banking history. An older black woman raised her hand. I was denied a loan here because I walked in wearing flip-flops. Does anyone remember me? Avery walked toward her. I remember you now, she said, and if you're willing, I want you to be the first to speak in the feedback lounge. The woman nodded, quietly, but on her face bloomed a smile that may have been asleep for over a decade. A bank branch can change its floors, its logos, its uniforms, but only when it changes how people look at each other can it truly call itself a bank. 3:46 p.m. The wind outside had shifted. Sunlight slid diagonally across the lobby floor, cutting through the glass panels and reflecting on the marble, marking the end of something unspoken. Inside, no one said goodbye, no one reached for her hand, but everyone felt the room thinning as if a center of gravity was being removed. Avery Sinclair didn't call for closure. She didn't make a final speech. She simply adjusted her blazer, covering the neckline that had been slightly open since she walked in. That alone was enough to signal the part that needed attention is over. Now it's time for correction. Lauren followed her, walking halfway to the door. You're not staying to hear the rest of the feedback, she asked. I'm not the one who needs to hear it, Avery replied. I just need to know that the people left behind have the spine to listen without defending themselves. Lauren nodded. She wasn't the same woman who once avoided eye contact behind her desktop. Now, she was someone who asked and answered with her head held high. Megan, the receptionist, stepped forward, this time by choice. She held a notebook. Not a company-issued one, but a personal journal. I wrote my mission statement. She said, you didn't ask for it yet, but I thought I should do it while I can still feel this. Avery took the notebook, didn't open it, just locked eyes with her. You don't need to rewrite everything, just start doing it differently starting from the next interaction. Megan nodded. Tears didn't fall this time, but the weight in her chest loosened. Inside the new feedback lounge, the elderly woman from earlier was speaking to Khalil, not angry, not broken, just telling her story as if it had been waiting for a witness for years. Khalil didn't interrupt, didn't take notes too quickly. He just listened the way a system should listen when it's finally trying to heal. A man in a light gray suit, sunglasses still on despite the soft light, stepped through the glass door. Excuse me, he said to Avery, are you the one leading this restructuring? Avery turned, her smile brief. No, I just turned on the light. The ones rewiring the circuits are already here. She stepped through the exit. No wave, no look back. She didn't leave behind orders. She left behind architecture. At exactly 4:00 p.m., an internal email was sent from Calhoun and Mercer HQ to every branch nationwide. Subject, Cultural Reform in Action, Lessons from Miami. Excerpt. We cannot control every employee's attitude, but from this day forward, every glance, every hesitation, every moment a customer is misread can and will be reviewed as systemic failure. One woman showed us that when authority doesn't wear a badge, it becomes even harder to ignore. Back inside the Miami branch, Lauren was helping staff reset the service area. No printed script, no training videos, just eye contact, tone, and timing. A new customer walked in older, wearing house clothes, tangled hair. "Hi," Lauren greeted her, gently. "What can I help you with today?" The woman hesitated. "I wanted to check a savings plan I applied for last week. I'm not sure I qualified." Lauren smiled, not out of politeness, but out of warmth. "No worries at all. Let's start from scratch. I'm Lauren, and you are." Outside, Avery entered a dark sedan. No custom plates, no driver waiting. She opened her tablet, scrolled through a list of other branches. Her finger paused over a name: Detroit Central Division. Click. An internal note appeared. Internal friction, power imbalance across race-based seniority lines. Avery tilted her head slightly. Familiar terrain. She tapped Initiate Random Review. A small ping echoed from her tablet. She didn't come to save a system. She came to make it impossible to pretend anymore. 4:42 p.m. The afternoon sun shifted its position, and so did the story. The glass panels reflected a lobby no longer the same, not because the staff had changed uniforms, not because the clients now dared to ask more questions, but because one presence had left without needing to declare that she had ever been there. Lauren stood behind the front desk, holding a training binder, but she wasn't looking at the print. Her hand was quietly sketching a sentence on a post-it note. Service starts with how you look at someone who has nothing to offer you. Next to her, Megan pinned a new sign to the wall. "No discrimination. We don't judge by what you wear, but by how we listen." Black letters, white background, no logo, no brand slogan, just policy turned into something human. A customer paused at the sign, read it, then asked, "Will it really be different now?" Megan didn't answer right away, but she didn't look away either. In the feedback lounge, an older white man, one who earlier had asked, "What's going on here?" was now sitting still. Not talking, just listening. A middle-aged woman of color was explaining how she had once been asked to go call the customer hotline simply because she wasn't sure which account type she needed. Her voice wasn't angry, it was measured, like a truth being told for the record. And this time someone was actually recording. Across the street, at a corner cafe, Ryan sat alone. Access revoked, no team group chats, no follow-up meetings. Just him, a paper cup of coffee, and a reflection in the tabletop where a spilled drop had shaped itself into something that resembled an eye. For the first time in years, Ryan asked himself, how have I been looking at people all this time? And Daniel? He had signed the transfer document, handed over every password, walked out without fanfare. But in the hallway just before exiting the building, he ran into Lauren. She didn't scold, didn't thank. She just nodded, and in that nod was the weight of 5 years unspoken, unforgiven, but no longer hidden. Daniel understood then, there are some failures that can't be cleaned with a good explanation. High above the Miami skyline, in the headquarters of Calhoun and Mercer, a boardroom sat silent. On the long table was Avery Sinclair's internal report, 3 pages, printed on plain white paper. No infographics, no motivational quotes, just this closing paragraph, bolded. If your organization only acts with integrity when a high-ranking person is present, then your organization is no longer worth preserving. The meeting ended early. 1 week later, all branches received a new directive. No more gray uniforms. Each employee may choose their own accessories, in accordance with their personal identity. Appearance will no longer be tied to service assumptions. In Miami, Lauren was now leading a new team. No desk barriers, no tight scripts. She smiled as a woman walked in wearing a market dress, her hair slightly messy. "Hi," Lauren greeted warmly. "What brings you in today?" The woman hesitated. I wanted to check the savings plan again. I wasn't sure I qualified the first time." Lauren replied, "That's okay, we can start from the beginning. I'm Lauren, and you are." Outside, Avery sat in a car, not chauffeured, no tinted windows. She opened her tablet, scrolled through a list of flagged branches, paused on one. Detroit Central Division. She tapped, a note appeared. Disproportionate denial rate for minority clients, internal friction between departments, power gaps aligned by race. Avery tilted her head. Same pattern, different city. She tapped again, initiate surprise audit. A soft ping confirmed it. She closed the screen, leaned back, and smiled, not because she had won, but because she knew. When silent power enters a room, it doesn't need to shout. It simply changes what cannot be unseen again. If this story touched your heart, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Every click helps us bring more powerful stories of empathy, justice, and silent strength to life. Your support is what fuels this journey. Let's keep standing together and rising higher, one story at a time. Stay safe and inspired.